G'day guys, Jason and Nick here from the Udder Farm. We're actually on the Udder Farm property today. I've got Nick on the back of the camera.
Hey everybody.
So you'll notice from last week, we had those 4 heifers we acquired. They finished their quarantine period, so we want to take them into town today and put them through the trial property through the cell grazing system in a hot wire. They haven't been trained to a hot wire, so we'll load them up and we'll run through the training practices on the property and what we do for new livestock and why.
Oh, okay. Come on, darling. Good girl. It's okay. Good girl.
Just completed the final checks on the trailer before we head on the tarmac. Obviously we loaded the girls up all right. We'll head into town and we'll unload them. We're on the trial property now. We've got them safely unloaded. We're just going to fill up their water and we'll leave them in this yard area till late this afternoon because we've just been moved again, so that'll settle them down. So in our training paddock, it's a 4 barbed wire fence, but we got 2 hot wires in there. As you can see, there's one at the bottom tucked amongst that grass there, and one at that height between the 2nd and 3rd hot wire. As you can see, that grass is pretty well touching that bottom wire all the way along, and in areas it touches that top wire around the paddock. So the first thing we've got to do is get rid of all that grass and growth off that hot wire. Because they've never had a hot wire before, you want it to be as hot as possible. And if you come up here to the panel itself, currently it's reading 2.7 kilovolts. So that normally, we can give that around the 4.85, so it's probably 50% of what it normally is. So the first thing we'll do is grab the whippersnipper and we'll cut all this growth off those 2 hot wires, and then we'll have another look at what the kilovolt is once we've cleared that. That's it. We'll have a look around now. We'll walk around the fence and we'll show you how clean it was on both sides, and then we'll come back and we'll have a look at the kilovolts now that there's no grass growth on the hot wire. So that's the fence along the drive. It's probably about a foot off the wire now, so that's that area that was really entangled upon that bottom wire. So it's clear now. We'll race across and we'll have a look at that fence line. So it's probably similar, a foot off. We'll have a look, and that's it back to the crush. So that's the bottom wire there, and the second wire there. There's absolutely no growth on that fence at all. So what we'll do is we'll duck back over to the charger now and we'll check out the kilovoltage. So the kilovoltage now, after we've cleaned it off, not sure if you can see that or not, that's 5.5. So we had 2.7 I think it was, so virtually we've doubled the kilovolts by just cleaning that growth off. So what we'll do is we'll set up the poly braid now and the step-ins across there, and we'll show you how we set those up. So I just want to cover the training of these cattle. So with these particular cattle, because we purchased them in and they're 12 months old, we haven't had a chance to train these cattle, hence why they're going into the training paddock, which is, like I mentioned before, has got 4 strands of barbed wire and 2 hot wires just inside there. This is what we call the training paddock, because if they were to, which they will, they're going to push the boundaries of this fence and they'll touch this a few times. They can't get spooked and move through it because of the 4 strands of barbed wire. But if you have a look at this other fence, this is what normally our internal fences are made out of. So this is a timeless T-post, and as you can see, it's got a hot wire, one hot wire, that's all it is in the whole paddock, and that keeps our cattle in and calves in. So what you don't want to be doing is bringing any cattle that haven't grown up on the property and introducing them to the cell grazing system into a paddock like this without having a bottom wire. Especially young calves. These are 12 months, I may get away with it, but if they're younger calves, say 8-9 months just being weaned off, what's going to happen is they will come over this fence. Because it's not 4 strand, it's only a single, they will graze this grass. They're likely to come underneath, not knowing that's hot, start grazing outside. Their back is going to get shocked and they're likely to jump out of the cell. Because they've been weaned off, there's no reason for them to go back in. They will keep going round. But with our younger calves, we don't need to train them because they grow up with their mum. They need to go back generally for milk. So that's why we have it 38 inches. Any younger calves, 42 inches, any younger calves can come in and out of this paddock back to their mums, and they will eventually learn as they grow up that that's hot and they won't be able to go underneath. We normally run 2-strand poly braid through the internal of our paddock so they can't push through. This is the only area they can get out, but they generally go back under the mum, or we help them back under. But you don't want to do that to new cattle that haven't been introduced from a young age to a hot wire, because they're likely to get out and there's no reason for them to go back. So what we'll go and cover now is what I do differently when I'm running my poly braid and my step-ins in the paddock for a training paddock. So when it comes to the training paddock now, for this section I'm going to tonight, I generally only use 4 step-ins, 4 O'Brien step-ins for this. So I like to increase it by either 50% or 25%, around thereabouts. Because I've got 4 tonight, I'm going to add additional 2 in, so I'm going to go 50% extra. Because they're not used to a poly braid, it is harder to see amongst the long grass. The more uprights you use, the more it looks like an existing fence what they're used to. So the more step-ins you get, they can see that they can differentiate between the long grass and a step-in which looks like a post. The additional difference I use is aluminium cans. So what I'm going to do with the loops on the aluminium cans, the drink tab, I'm going to take the handle off your poly braid and thread them onto the poly braid. Thread them in so they're dangling. Because it's a shiny surface and they're young calves, they generally like to come up and sniff it to see what it is, which the glistening in the sun. And aluminium is one in the top 5 metals for conducting electricity, so it's a perfect conductor for electricity. As they put their wet nose on it, they'll get zapped, and when they do it a few times or they touch the poly braid a few times, they're getting that shock. So the association of the pain with that poly wire comes into play. So we've got probably, I reckon we're going to have close to 6 or 7 days in the training paddock. By the time they get to the end, they're going to have touched either a can multiple times and the poly braid, so they would be right. And then we're putting them in the paddock, which we were just talking about, with a single hot wire. Then they've been trained to a hot wire, the association is there, and we shouldn't have an issue. You do get the odd one that comes out and you've got to put them back in, but generally after 8 days they're generally over it. The association is there. So what we'll do is we'll get this set up now and we'll show you what it looks like. So here's the setup. What I did is I run the quad up and run it back, and obviously that grass was laid down under the tyres and also under the motor of the quad, so that prepares your area so all this grass isn't touching the hot wire. What we did then is run the step-ins in, run the line out and then put the step-ins in. So like I said, I used 50% more step-ins than I normally would, and there's the can. So I didn't turn that on. So those cans are just dangling there. As you can see, they're all the way along. I don't know if you can see this, but they've been standing there for the last half an hour. There was 3 of them got zapped, or there was 3 zaps. I'm not sure whether 2 or 3, but we know we counted 3 zaps. They've come back in here. It's just on dusk now, and it's been half an hour. They've been staring at that gateway. So they got green pasture out here that they're not game to go to because there's something out there that's bit them on the nose. That is the association starting to happen. They're associating pain with whatever's out there. And this is what I'm talking about. This is what training is all about. They may stay in this comfortable area where they've been all day, haven't been zapped, because it's their safe haven. So we'll come out in the morning and see if there's still any of them, and think they're going to make their way out overnight. But this is what I'm talking about, and this is what it takes. The association, the first thing they touched was the can. Glittery, shiny thing, went straight up to it, zap. 2 of them were zapped by cans, and 1 of them touched the nose on the poly braid. So they've had 22 hours in this cell, and they're still in this cell. So obviously the hot wire training is starting to work. What I'm going to do now though is I'm going to set the next cell up, and I'm going to take that back fence down so they can still come across this area, but there's no reason for them to come through because they soiled and urinated on this area. They'll eat out of the green new pickings and won't come back. But I'm going to give them access to the yard for 1 more night because that's their safe haven. So if they do get zapped, they can go back. But as of tomorrow moving forward, they're going to be allocated to that Pacific cell. So that's given 2 days to get used to the property, us, and also the cell system. They've got the safe haven for 2 nights, and then from here on forward, they're going to be moving with the cell. So we've set up that new fence, and we've taken this back fence down. So they can go back and out their safe haven. So they'll be going into that new pasture tonight. There's loads of grass to eat, and there'll be no reason to come back in here. Like I mentioned, this has been soiled, but we'll duck over and have a look what they've done overnight. So this is Rhodes grass, I can tell by the seeds. Have a look what they lay down. You know, it's not about you need experienced cattle to do this. It's all about putting them into a cell, high density grazing. Cattle will eat what they need to consume in a day. They'll keep walking around because you've got them in one area. They'll just keep walking, and like I said, they will eat pastures that they wouldn't generally eat. So this is obviously lower in quality because it's already come to seed, but they're still choosing to eat it because you force them into an area to eat stuff that they generally wouldn't eat. They would sooner have greener clippings, but they're still hungry, and this is what high density grazing does. They're walking constantly back and forwards in a small area, laying the grass down, adding that thatch, armouring the soil. So this is perfect. So you don't need to train them to do that. It's just training for the hot wire. So anyway guys, we're going to call it at that. So have a good morning, have a great afternoon, and a terrific evening guys, wherever you're watching this from, and we'll catch you later.